Squid Game is back. After a 3-year wait, Netflix's biggest hit of all time, masterminded by Hong Dong-hak, has finally returned. I was a huge fan of the series' original run, and have been looking forward to the sequel ever since Ji-hoon dyed his hair pink and ditched that plane to America many moons ago. So was the wait worth it? I'd have to say so. The season does suffer slightly from what I'd like to coin Invincible syndrome, a significantly longer than average wait time between seasons that influences expectations. If you're going into Squid Game 2 expecting it to be the best season of television you've ever seen, especially since they've made the audience wait so long, you most likely will be disappointed. Having preemptively announced a third and final season next year, this year's storyline does feel incomplete, as if they're saving most resolutions for the final chapter. In contrast to something like Dune Prophecy though, this left me excited for what's next. But that's enough preamble. What's the actual story like? Surprisingly strong. I use the word surprising not because I doubted the creative team necessarily, but because the original Squid Game did have a lightning in a bottle quality to it. I mean, it wasn't even the first story to do the concept of down-on-their-luck individuals being forced to compete in blood sports, but its style and cast of eccentric characters made it unique within the subgenre. So the return will just be a new lineup of wacky broke boys and gals competing in bigger, more colorful, more violent games, right? Well, yes and no. The show starts off with 2 episodes that establish just how difficult it is to even find the games again. With his blood-soaked resources from the first game, Ji-hoon is doing everything in his power to find the Dokji playing, face-slapping recruiter for the games. Through the bread or lottery, rock, paper, scissors -1, and Russian roulette sequences, we are reminded what the show is about, testing the boundaries of the internal human struggle that is morality versus greed. And before even getting to the games proper, we are reminded of one of the harshest realities of the show, player choice. With the bread or lottery decision in particular, the human psyche's desire for more, as opposed to the safe thing, is plainly put on display. As Ji-hoon and his militia, as well as new friends Jun-ho and Woo-seok, gear up to find the island and put a stop to the games, this idea is present as well. The safe thing to do would be to walk away, to live the rest of their lives leaving that mysterious island behind them. But they want more, the chance to risk it all for the big payout, destroying the games. That's the main crux of this season, and presumably the rest of the series. Ji-hoon is determined to take down his oppressors, believing the games to be sadistic manipulation rather than the fair opportunity the people behind the masks claim them to be. Once he finds himself back, waking up in those uncomfortable-looking bunk beds, he immediately does his best to convince the other players of the dangers of the game and the horrors they're soon to experience. But even after the first game, there are still plenty who want to continue. Here we get one of the best additions to this season, the player vote after every game. The show further enforces that theme of choice, illustrating to the audience exactly which characters do and don't want to be here, who's driven by insatiable greed, and who really just needs the money for survival. The addition of forcing the characters to wear patches that display their votes is just icing on the cake, making the tension between growing factions visibly evident. And that's largely what the season is, a growing divide between those that believe and support Ji-hoon's cause and the opposition that just wants to play one more game. This season adopted more of a handheld look in certain sequences, giving the show an almost documentary-like feel. Even more so now, we are in the action with Ji-hoon, taking on a more intimate perspective of a character who is not just struggling through the games as he has before, but is now actively trying to convince those around him to adopt his moral framework. The overall aesthetic and style of the set design and now iconic costumes still contribute wonderfully to the psychological horror involved, juxtaposing bright, vibrant colors against the dark red blood of fallen competitors. It wouldn't be Squid Game without a few brutally violent children's games, and the season does deliver a solid redux of red light, green light, as well as a few exciting new additions. The initial game being one that fans will recognize is used as a demonstration that Ji-hoon is in fact knowledgeable in the games when his warnings come to pass. The fact that his help saved so many more lives here compared to how many survived this game in the first season shows that listening to him may in fact be good for your health. But when he tries to save a player by dragging them across the line after being shot, he's reminded that he won't be able to save everybody. The second game is a particular standout, a relay race through 5 minigames that daisy chains competitors together, forcing them to rely on each other to get through the gauntlet before time runs out. This game does a great deal of capturing the tension and stress that not only comes with playing, but with who you choose to make alliances with as well. This season puts an even bigger focus on making alliances, giving us a feel for our new heroes and villains. A few notable mentions being a pregnant woman and her crypto bro ex, an English-loving rapper by the name of Thanos, a degenerate gambler's son and his overly concerned mother, a religious fanatic, and a transgender woman with a military background. The show even goes so far as to have the frontman join the games as well, forcing Ji-hoon to unknowingly ally with the very force he's trying to stop. Having the frontman as part of the games creates additional danger both off and on the field. You're never sure how far he's willing to take the ruse, paralleling the Russian roulette game between Ji-hoon and the recruiter. There's nothing preventing him from taking Ji-hoon out at any moment, cheating the integrity of the game, but leaving himself and the organization as the victors over a rebellion in its infancy. And yet the games continue. The third game of the season is my least favorite, putting the players on a lazy Susan in the middle of the room, spinning them around until randomly stopping and announcing a number. The players must then make groups of that number and enter a small room before the time limit in order to proceed to the next round. I get what they're going for here in terms of the dramatic tension. Forcing players to have to pick and choose who to leave behind does feed back into that motif of alliance making, but unfortunately the game itself doesn't seem that creative to me. Season 1 had several games like Marbles and the Glass Bridge that were ripe with people turning on one another, but the games themselves were interesting and made me want to participate. This final game of the season is essentially musical chairs, and maybe I'm just extra salty because I've never been good at that one myself. I also think that this game leaves me feeling a bit underwhelmed because it's the final game. While this season does have other elements to juggle that contribute to the overall lore of the games and the plot to take them down, the barbarian in me couldn't help but want to see Ji-hoon take the bloodstained field at least one more time before the season's end. Let me speak to those other aspects of the story for a second. A welcome new addition to our cast of characters is No Yule, a down-on-her-luck woman who wants to participate in the games as a means of reuniting with her daughter. The twist? She's not joining as a player, but as a pink-clad, arms-bearing guard. Getting to see the games through the eyes of one of the cold-hearted employees that eliminates players is a fresh angle that gives the entire situation a new context. If those that run the game are starting from the same economical disadvantages as our cast of players, does that somehow make their actions more ethical? The recruiter tells Ji-hoon he started as a pink suit, just like this woman we are now following. Similarly, we also know that the frontman started as a competitor in the games before somehow becoming a part of their staff. Is it possible that everybody involved in the games is participating by their own free will, players and staff alike? No Yule is also a character with her own moral and ethical code, choosing to give the players swift deaths, directly opposing her superiors who aim to use barely live bodies for their own nefarious purposes. It's yet another interesting layer to add, the idea that there is a right and a wrong way to conduct the games. Well, at least a way that's more right than another. She's established as a character that may become a significant problem for both those above and below her, a potential future ally for Ji-hoon, or a villain in the making. The last significant storyline throughout the season is that of Junho and Ji-hoon's militia continuing their search for the island. It's the weakest storyline of the season, taking a character that was responsible for so much effective espionage in the first season and relegating him to treading water for the majority of his screen time. Junho and the team are on a wild goose chase, only making progress at the end after finding a booby-trapped island we assume to be near the games. Couple that with a twist that comes far too late, and you end up with a character that feels like he's not accomplishing nearly as much as he should be. Like many other second chapters in their respective trilogies, this story ends on what Dante Hicks would describe as a series of down endings. After the third game, multiple riots break out, first in the bathroom between the X's and O's, then in the form of a shootout between Ji-hoon's rebellion and the guards. The insidious nature of the games is on full display, inevitably boiling over into violence off the field. In one particularly standout sequence, the frontman and Ji-hoon discuss their plan of attack against the guards, the frontman being devilishly satisfied when Ji-hoon expresses his willingness to trade lives for the cause. In this moment, Ji-hoon himself has begun to see other human lives as pawns in a greater game, a chilling irony that will surely lead to an even stronger dynamic between these two in the final installment. The rebellion loses the battle, with the frontman faking his own death to slink off back to his original role and bring order to the chaos of the failed uprising. No-Yul falls in line after being attacked and threatened by her fellow guards, and Junho is left only slightly closer to the island, still oblivious to the immediate danger he's in. By the end, we're not even entirely sure if the current games are going to continue, although I'm betting they will go on, possibly even with a now broken and defeated Ji-hoon. It's an intriguing cliffhanger for what will hopefully be a very satisfying ending, but I do feel like the season was cut a bit short. Junho's storyline in particular could have used another couple of beats, giving him more to do than spend the bulk of the season playing catch-up, without ever actually catching up. Reducing the episode count to only 7 this time around did leave me feeling like I could have really used another hour or two to flesh out some of the new stories and characters, but what we did get here is still strong, even if not as tight as its predecessor. Where the show shines once again is its examination of the human condition when facing financial destitution and isolation. It asks difficult questions, like is greed inherent to the individual, or is it enforced by the masses? It's the kind of show that leaves me thinking about its bigger themes long after the credits roll, and I'm eagerly awaiting the concluding chapter. Just make sure to give me a few more games next time around. Squid Game 2 gets a bread plus.